So I think that's where people need to understand, okay, what are they really telling me with this, let's say, flexibility explanation? Does it translate to me as a customer in being more operational flexible, or is it just a nice future, but for me, it doesn't really have that value?
Yeah, and it seems like operational flexibility is so important now, given all the disruptions that you're seeing in supply chain. Things are always changing, demands are always changing.
Correct.
It seems really important. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast, The Automation Journey. I'm Marissa Dierlam, Head of Marketing for TGW in North America. And today I'm joined by Patricio Miranda Febres, the Chief Sales Officer for TGW North America. Welcome back to the podcast. Last time you were here, we had a fun conversation with Stipe where we talked about what's trending in supply chain and automation. And we got your takes on which trends will last and how to get the most value out of those. Similarly, today, I want to get your takes on some of the common buzzwords being used in our industry for specifically goods-to-person automation. But before we dive into that, I think it'd be interesting, especially for people who didn't catch the last episode, to hear a little bit about your own automation journey. So when did you first learn about warehouse automation and how has it shaped your career?
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Mm-hmm.
So I started in industry 23 years ago. At that time, TGW was still mainly a component supplier, and I was learning the industry through my role as application engineer at that time, doing mechatronic designs, working together with the biggest integrators at the time. And then we started our own integration business, and I was lucky to be one of the first one involved because we started outside the German region, and that was in Spain. So I was there since the beginning, and we were bringing to the Spanish market our main customers to help us out deliver the sites. That's how I learned from all these big integration companies how to design and how to analyze data and how to actually what are the main challenges of our customers and so on, right? So that I did until 2011, 2012. And then I moved into development where my job was to develop I was in charge of developing the goods-to-person system for TGW called FlashPick and the other system that came after that, right? So, and I did this until about 2.5 years when I came and joined the US team. And since then I'm here. So my perspective is very TGW based, but it's still a very good overview about the industry because I've been quite long here. So.
Yeah. Well, given all that experience, especially about goods to person and development of FlashPick, that's why I wanted to get you to talk about some of these words that often get thrown around in our industry for goods to person automation. I think everyone uses these words a lot. Admittedly, we use them maybe a little bit too much. And that leads to the meaning of these words getting diluted over time. So for each buzzword, I'd like to get your take on how the industry is generally using that word versus how you use it and how you describe it to our customers. So let's start with one that actually came up a little bit on the last episode you were on, flexible. So how do you think others are using that word flexible, and how do you define it and use it with customers?
I want to talk about flexibility in the perspective of the end customer, right? So I link always flexibility to operational flexibility. This means how did the system or the solution that this customer has or have implemented can react to different circumstances, right? Like, I don't know, different order structures or different requests about service levels and things like that. So I think in the industry, there's always the perspective of the end customer and the value that a solution or system delivers to them and the perspective of the vendor. And I think most of the time you hear about what the perspective of the vendor is, right? And when people talk about flexibility, normally they try to talk about their, let's say, product features or technical features that show that the solution is flexible. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's operationally flexible and delivers such a value for the end customer, right? So I think that's where people need to understand, okay, what are they really telling me with this, let's say, flexibility explanation? Does it translate to me as a customer in being more operational flexible, or is it just a nice future, but for me, it doesn't really have that value?
Yeah, and it seems like operational flexibility is so important now, given all the disruptions that you're seeing in supply chain. Things are always changing. Demands are always changing.
Correct.
It seems really important. I think my ears always ring when I hear this word because, it depends on how people are using the word. Do they mean flexible like it can do lots of different things, or flexible like that operational flexibility like you're saying? So I think it's really important to be able to call that out for our customers. So the next word is similar, and I think some people actually use it interchangeably with flexible, but the word is scalable. How do you see it being used for goods to person, and what do you mean when you use that word?
I mean, for me, scalable is a solution or that it's able to be expanded over time without interrupting the customer operations, right? So, and I think many technologies can do that. But I think, again, if you think about the purely technology, there are technologies that look from the outside more scalable than others.
Mm-hmm.
But this doesn't necessarily mean that it is like that, right? So you need to be able to expand the business, not just in performance or maybe storage locations, but potentially our functionality-wise without disrupting the customer, right? Operations. So that's what that's when I do think it's something is scalable.
Yeah, and I think sometimes fixed automation, kind of more set in stone automation, gets a rep for being not necessarily scalable. But do you think both mobile and fixed automation can be scalable?
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the misunderstandings. For sure, one technology looks more scalable than the other. That's definitely the case. With mobile automation, looks that it's easier. But this, and probably it's a little bit easier, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what people call fixed automation is not scalable at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's by far not true, but there's a huge perception in that regard.
So then how do you think about scalable versus another buzzword you hear, modular? What's kind of the difference between those two?
I mean, I think solution needs to be modular in order to be scalable, definitely. So it's kind of a precondition of scalability to be modular, and such thing you need to design the solution like that from the ground, right? So I think, again, there are technologies that are perceived more modular because they are easier to understand. But this does not mean that others which have a little bit more of complexity from look and feel aren't modular at all. Mm-hmm. It's harder to perceive and you need way more explanation, but it's not that they are not modular. But of course, if you look into a drawing or into if you go to a site and you see mobile automation, it's perceived way more modular and scalable just because of the low amount of different components or modules that the solution has, and therefore it looks easier, right? I think those type of solutions are for sure easier from the implementation point of view and more simple. But the constraints and the restrictions and the complexity is on the logical level, which is something that you don't see when you go on site and watch the system, or when you see the layout, or when someone shows you a demo or things like that. The complexity is not clear for the end user at that point of time, right? But it has also some complexity and some limitations, but it's not so visible as others. So
what are then the modular aspects of FlashPick? What does it look like to really scale that up on a modular level?
I mean, FlashPick, it's a solution which is built with shuttles and a conveyor loop and workstations. The workstations are the fastest in the industry, and you can expand FlashPick station by station, right? Obviously, there is a moment of time that if you expand, let's say, 6 workstations, then you need to go to another loop connection, and therefore you have a big jump in scalability. And that type of automation has maybe bigger scalability steps, right? Because of the modularity, how it's set up, than mobile automation, for example, where you can maybe scale station by station, but also bot by bot, for example, right? So that's more granular for sure. But the other one is also scalable, and in that case, FlashPick has clear steps how you can scale it, and normally those steps make sense for a certain size of business, right? There's more the business is, potentially the mobile automation one scales in a more granular way that fits that type of business better. But if it's a more established and bigger business, I think the scalability steps that FlashPick, for example, has or similar solutions are still good enough for that type of business.
Yeah. All right, so the next feature or benefit word I see getting used and probably misused is plug and play. And the reason I struggle with this one is, like you were saying a little bit, the implementation of automation is so complicated. Is there anything really as easy as plug and play makes it seem?
It depends what people understand of the plug and play. Plug and play for me is like plugging in this microphone and then it goes, right? So in the automation, there's nothing like this, right? I mean, for sure, if you have a mobile automation solution and you want to add 1 or 2 bots, for sure, maybe they go like that, right? They just need to be teached in and then they start going. That's maybe the closest type of plug and play system that we have compared to the others. But if you go beyond that, and those are just small scalability steps, but if you go beyond that you need to put a new workstation or you need to add a certain functionality to the system, then it's not going to be from one day to the next, right? Because you need to go through several design steps in order to achieve that. For sure, everyone is trying to go more towards plug and play and reduce downtimes and reduce implementation times. But it's in our industry still nothing from one day to the next.
Do you think it's really a feature that is interesting to our customers, or is it more like something vendors are excited to try to, get buzz or excitement about?
I think it's definitely a great feature because the shorter the time that you can spend between, let's say, deciding that you want to move on with automation and the time you can have a real use of it or the system is going live, the better it is, right? The faster the payback will be, and also the amount of time that a customer needs to be looking ahead is shorter, right? Because they can react quicker to whatever changes. That's where also scalability and modularity plays again a role, because if you can implement the solution faster and then scale it later on also very quickly, then you don't need that much time to look ahead in order to plan whatever the solution might be look like in 3 years from now, right? You can react faster. So that's definitely a good thing, and it's something that definitely the whole industry is going towards.
Yeah. All right, the next buzzword to dive into is future-proof. I think everyone is generally using this one the same, but I'd still like to hear how you would define it with customers.
I think future-proof, again, goes in two different ways, but I like to take the perspective again of the end customer and say, for me, a solution is future-proofed when, as I go back to the beginning, is operationally flexible, right? This means whatever happens in the future, obviously within a frame, I can deal with it, right? Or I can deal with it even if it's outside the frame with taking up some compromises, but still works, right? And that's the perspective I like to go around that.
Do you think this is a word that's starting to get overused? Like, if you could decide today how much people use this word, would you say stop using it so much?
No, I would say I think it's obviously getting more and more, but I think it's okay how it's used today. I would say it's not bad to push into that direction, but I think sometimes things get used too much, and these buzzwords you see them all around the place, and then people talk about it without giving it much more meaning.
Yeah.
Right? So just at high level, everybody talks about it, but when you drill down there, maybe there are very few that can really explain you what it is about.
Another thing I think about too with future-proof is the role of lifetime services in that too, because automation, I think, cannot really be future-proof without maintenance, right?
That's correct, but I would say every system needs to have I would say, rather easy way to keep it up and be maintained. But I definitely would say future-proof is way more about the flexibility of the operation than anything else, right? Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people, again, from the vendor perspective, saying my system or my solution is future-proof because I have the latest technology. Right? But this is not real future-proof because that latest technology doesn't adapt as good as you need to for your different needs, like, I don't know, working hours or different order types, or, expanding capabilities in a reasonable time, then it's not future-proof. It doesn't matter if the technology is the latest, right? Yeah.
All right, the next buzzword is two words that actually kind of get used a little bit interchangeably. So smart and intelligent. Especially with how much AI is entering the conversation, I'm seeing these two words pop up more and more. So how do you think others are tending to use those words, and how do you use it?
So again, for me, intelligent system, it will be a system that is able to react to changes, right? Unexpected changes. So for example, I don't know, if order profiles are changing over the day, the system should adapt to it by itself and use the resources the best way possible without human interaction. That will be an intelligent or smart system for me, right? And I think with AI, it's getting more towards that the system is learning and able to react and take decision by its own without human interaction. But I think we are not that as far as we could. I mean, I think there's a lot of investment in that direction, but that's what I would say is intelligent system, right? Because everything else, so far has been hard coded. If this happened, this is how you react. If this happens, how you react. But for me, intelligent system would be, okay, if something happens that was not in the plan, how do I go along with it, right?
Yeah, I think that's the struggle I have, is sometimes smart or intelligent is used for something that's just hard coded into it. But like you're saying, I think really what it should be talking about more is the involvement of AI and actually acting on things in the moment.
Learning from data and learning from how reacted and how did it well, how good it went with the use of the resources, and if can you repeat that or optimize that for the future.
Yeah.
Right?
All right, next buzzword is innovative. This word also just drives me nuts because I feel like everyone's just using it. And how do you even define innovative as a word?
It's hard, but I think for me, innovation is something that it's new, that is either something new or something or a new way of doing things, but it needs to deliver value at the end of the day. So it needs to be able to improve something and deliver some value. Maybe, let's say, save labor costs or reduce energy costs or costs overall, or improve SLAs or whatever, right? But it needs to deliver a value.
Some sort of transformation,
And people, again, confuse a lot of innovation with features.
Yes.
Product features.
Yeah.
So if I bring out a new feature, I'm saying, okay, we are great innovating because I have this new feature. But how does this new feature benefits me as a customer, right? If I cannot relate to that and prove that this delivers a tangible result, that's for me an invention, but it's not innovative enough, right?
Yeah. So what do you think are some of the most innovative things that you're seeing in goods-to-person automation?
I would say, to make example for our technology, I mean, we did years ago our first picking robot design and development. That didn't went as good as we thought because we were assuming we will get perfect data, right, from the end customers to be able to pick the product. So that was a hard lesson we needed to learn, because it didn't work like that, because there's no such a thing as perfect data. And no one can maintain the data in a way that robot would have been able to use it, right? So we learned the hard way, and now we have a development which recognizes the data by itself and learns from the experience and try to improve the way it grabs items, recognizes items, and so on. And I think this is extremely innovative because it does deliver results. We have the first, 6 robots running across the world, and they are learning and getting faster and learning from each other. So I think that setup is very innovative.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to a pair of buzzwords that are often used together or interchangeably. So sustainable and energy efficient. How would you, first of all, describe the difference between those two words, sustainable and energy efficient?
I mean, I think energy efficient contributes to sustainability for sure, right? That's how I will see them interlink. And energy efficiency is great if you can have it for, let's say, for a reasonable amount of money. And all the TGW systems, wherever we can, have the ability to recover energy, right? So for example, when our shuttles are breaking, they're recovering energy to be used in the other shuttle, which is accelerating and so on. Also in the lifts and things like that, right? And also we try to design our systems that if they are not used, they shut down and they have a smart kinematics, or we let's say adapt the kinematics of the system based on the workload that they have, so to minimize energy consumption. That's all great, and that's try to reducing the energy. But I think sustainability goes way farther than that. So saving energy, reducing the energy consumption goes a long way, but sustainability goes way beyond that. So sustainability will mean for me, okay, what do you do with a system where the end of life is being reached, right? Are you able to, let's say, reuse parts of it, or at least the components or the materials from that system, and you're able to do a full circle, right? And I think the industry is by far not yet there.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you worry about greenwashing too. So saying something is sustainable, but then, like you said, they're not necessarily thinking about that end of life. What does that look like for the technology? So do you think companies are typically using this word correctly?
I would say there's a lot of, let's call it, marketing around sustainability, and that everybody's going in that direction. I think there is a push to go in that direction, way more in Europe than we see it here in the US, right? But I think we are far from being an industry that is 100% sustainable, right? So I think there are a lot of good efforts. I think we have done a lot in energy recovery and trying to minimize the consumption.
Yeah.
but there's still a long way to go in terms of materials and how to recycle them completely and so on and so on.
Yeah. As sustainability goals become a higher priority in supply chain initiatives, how do our customers make sure they understand exactly what these words mean when someone says that their technology is sustainable or energy efficient and that they get the value out of it that they're looking for?
I think there are industries where these requirements are higher, right? Like in the fashion industry, I think there's a big movement since years now that everything they do is more sustainable, and they are raising their requirements on us, on what is our carbon footprint on the production side, but also on the equipment side when we get to the site and so on and so on. So there's definitely a push, and value will increase over time, but I think it's still very intangible
right now. Yeah.
Right?
All right, last buzzword I'd like to get your take on is high performance. How do you think others are using that word, and how do you use it, if you use it with customers?
I mean, we do use high performance from the customer point of view, and it's mainly driven by the operator performance, right? So we have our one-to-one workstation in FlashPeak. We are proud to say that's the fastest in the market, and therefore you can reach, I don't know, let's say, performances of $600 to $700 an hour, right? And that's for us high performance. Of course, the overall mechanical equipment and design, which is in the background, needs to allow the operator to fulfill that performance. But that's not, for example, what we try to publish or show to the customer, that our shuttle is the fastest and those kind of stuff. That shuttle is a piece, a component of the whole system in order to be able to serve the totes or the goods to the operator. But for us, the performance is around the operator, which has a direct impact on the amount of labor that the customer will have, right? And therefore, the labor cost will be lower, and that's where we deliver the benefit. But if a machine is faster or slower than others, I don't think there's a real comparison for them. So if they compare vendors, which has the fastest shuttle.
So do you think it's less about like a benchmark and more about like the overall capabilities of the system all combined?
Because, I mean, you can compare different products and their performances or their rates or speeds, accelerations, things like that. But it doesn't say much, because when you put all of these components together, then you build up a system. Then you need to benchmark the output, right? Either in orders per day, orders per hour, things like that. But individual component rates or benchmarking just performance of the individual machines doesn't bring any value for the end customer.
Yeah. So for a lot of these words, especially the ones that are maybe more vague than others, how do you think our customers are typically reacting to them? Do you think they kind of take them on face value, or how do you walk through our customers as they absorb these buzzwords?
So my experience is that it's extremely challenging for them, right? So I think there's different customers and they are in different spots of their automation journey, right? So for a, let's say, newcomer in the automation world, it's very hard to try to understand what they should be looking for. Just because they have no reference, right? So I think those type of customers struggle way more with these buzzwords because they are trying to understand them and they have different perspective from different vendors. And it's way harder to compare, right? I think the more experienced ones, maybe they even already learn how to compare this in a technical level, or they just focus on the value that this setup brings to them, and then it's easier for them to compare. It's less technical, let's say, right? But definitely it's a struggle because there are so many people talking about these things in different ways that you don't know who is talking to you about what at that moment of time.
Yeah. So how would you advise companies who are looking into goods-to-person automation to make sure that they get all of the benefits and value that they're looking for?
I mean, my advice would be that the customer looks everything always only from their perspective and don't try to get too much into the technical details to compare things, because then it's where it gets very complex. At the end of the day, these systems all need to deliver certain KPIs, throughput, storage locations, orders per day. I would try to advise them to stay more on their perspective, on the customer side, with the KPIs that they measure their operation also, in order to compare these systems.
So then is it really even possible to compare apples to apples?
It's very hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible from that perspective, in my opinion. Which functionality do they offer you? What would happen in case of error? What happens if these unexpected things will happen? How would your system react? This is how you right? But you will measure it from your operations point of view. But if you get into the technical, let's say, comparison, it gets very complicated because then you need to make sure that you somehow equalize these technologies, which they are all looking differently and behaving differently. So it's very hard.
Yeah. All right. To wrap up our conversation, I'd be curious to hear your opinion on how sales and marketing teams, especially here in TGW, should use these terms and make sure that they are not overusing or using the wrong meaning for buzzwords. So how would you advise our sales and marketing teams to do that?
I would go the same way as I said before. I would say always try to look at it from the customer perspective because it needs to make sense to the end customer, right? As long as they don't get what the benefit for them is, there's no value for them. I mean, we can talk about all our technical features, but first of all, it's very hard that they will get the exact point because there's so much out there and it gets overwhelming. Like if you go to a show like ProMat or Modex, you see so much out there that I believe if I would be on that side, it will be overwhelming, right? So I wouldn't know where to start. So I would also suggest our own guys to go always through the customer perspective because that's a big equalizer, right?
Well, thanks for your time. It's always great to hear your thoughts. Any other final words of wisdom about buzzwords, especially for goods to person?
Thank you very much for having me. I think maybe the last word would be always think about customer value and reach out to TGW, find a way into automation. I think we can always be helping you consult in which direction you should go with your requirements. And we are always willing to have conversation with our customers also to learn, to see where the journey is going. Because we don't want to design or develop anything that doesn't have a clear value for the end customer. So whatever the customers' requirements are, and they are changing over time. Obviously, as consumer habits are changing, their requirements are changing, and therefore we need to adapt. So we're willing to engage in any kind of those conversations to keep learning from them, to adapt and tailor our offering to them.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Well, listeners, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If so, make sure you subscribe to our podcast and always are staying tuned and ready for the next episode. If you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, feel free to drop a comment as well, and we'll keep that in mind. Thanks so much for listening.